culture, and turning tables with Jim Taylor of Benchmark 60, the most progressive restaurant podcast featuring staff-centric operation solutions for the food and beverage industry's most persistent problems. Chef Adam is a highly regarded consultant for the hospitality community on the topics of change management, improving organizational culture, and internal community building. And with that, I will pass it over to Adam to share his story.
Thanks,
Adam.
Erin.
Oh, sorry. And if everybody else can leave their, make sure that your microphone is off, please.
First off, thanks very much for giving me such a warm welcome. I was supposed to be here last month, and that's kind of where I'd like to start my story. You know, and sometimes life is so synchronistic and ironic. It's like I want to get hit in the face with a wet fish. So I'm supposed to be on the Monday night call. The previous week, my wife had planned to do a retreat in the Bahamas. Typically, I would go along with her to do the cooking. And I was just kept checking in and said, yeah, I don't think I'm supposed to go with you. Like, I'm not quite sure why, but I'm not supposed to go. And she's like, okay, well, I trust your guidance. So I dropped her off at the airport in Charlotte, which is about 90 minutes away, Sunday morning. And then Monday morning, I woke up to a text that my 30-year-old daughter, who I have two grown daughters who live close to me, but over the mountain range in Tennessee, in a kind of rugged, it's straight in the mountains. They live in a little, what they call a trail town. So the Appalachian Trail, as it goes through, cuts through the mountains, there are certain towns that are designated as trail towns where people who are walking the trail can kind of fall out and pick up their mail and take a shower and stuff like that. So the story of how they got there is kind of weird because they had spent their entire lives in South Florida. And after me and my wife moved here, about a year later, I got a text saying, hey, by the way, we're moving to Tennessee. I'm like, what? I mean, these two girls have been running around in a cul-de-sac in bare feet for most of their lives. And now they're going to come up to the mountains. Anyway, so my 30-year-old, my youngest daughter, left work Sunday night. Or she works in the service industry. And about a quarter mile away from her job down one of these mountain roads, she lost control of her vehicle and slammed into a tree head on at 50 miles an hour. And when I got that text, I immediately jumped in my car and ran up there. Now, whether or not she was impaired when she left, I don't know. She may or may not have left a controlled substance in her purse in the car when she kicked out her windshield and concussed, started walking along this mountain road at 2 o'clock in the morning. And some random dude just picks her up and magically takes her all the way back to her sister's house. So I was pretty much a wreck on Monday and had communicated to Jasmine. I'm like, holy shit, man, I can't be on this because I'm right in the middle. I'm like actually in the emergency room at 6 o'clock p.m. And as it turned out, we were very, very lucky. She didn't have any broken bones. She didn't have any torn muscles. And eventually, even though I secured legal representation for her, the cops never searched the vehicle and they didn't press charges on her for leaving the scene. So in the end, it all worked out great. But that Monday and Tuesday being with her and kind of like being in dad mode, I kind of felt, you know, okay, going to do this and do this and do this and do this and do this. And when I found out that the lawyer wasn't going to be talking to the police officer until Friday, I decided to come home Tuesday night because I had another presentation to do Wednesday morning. And I could feel my neck starting to tighten up. And I was like, what the hell is that? And Wednesday morning, I woke up and it felt like I had pinched a nerve in my neck, radiating pain down my arm. Backstory is, having been in the industry since I was 15 and washing dishes and throwing my body around with reckless abandon, in my desire to be the apex predator in the aquarium, I've had 3 back surgeries so far. So in the back of my mind, there's a part of me that's thinking, shit, man, degenerative disc disease. Like, really? Like, is that going to be what I get to look forward to? And I couldn't sleep, couldn't get into a good position. My wife, who is transformational coach, was just like looking at me, and she had a great deal of sympathy for me because I was trying everything. I got one of those zero gravity lawn chairs, tried to sleep in that. I mean, I was trying everything, could not do it. And so consequently, I've spent the last 10 days on the couch. Meanwhile, all my responsibilities have been piling up. Now, coincidentally, I'd come to a point where I had been in kind of an inquiry about how I had conducted business over the last 2 years. I was last gainfully employed as a director of dining at a retirement community here in Nashville in June 2021. And somehow in the space of a year and a half, I'd managed to burn through $110,000 trying to create 3 businesses. And so I had just paid off this credit card when I walked into the lawyer's office, and he goes, okay, that'll be $3,500. And I just dropped the credit card down on the table because, of course, the first thing I was thinking about is, okay, first my daughter, then we'll worry about that. But what I didn't consider was that all this had been working in the background. So last night, as we're sitting on the couch and I'm trying to get into a comfortable position, my wife says to me, okay, do you mind if we do the Yesence technique, which is a somatic kind of diagnostic tool. It's kind of like kinesiology without the muscle testing, asking a bunch of questions and kind of looking at what's there. So, all right, so look at the pain. What color is it? What size is it? How heavy is it? All these different questions. And through our conversation, I was able to land on this fact that my dad, whom I loved very much, was a college professor, and he died when he was 60. That would have made me 30 years old. Incredibly talented piano player. And at one point actually admitted to me that all he'd ever hoped for his life was, he just wanted to play piano in a honky-tonk bar. And yet my impression of him was always being the good dad, like working really hard. As a matter of fact, he had held the chair of his department, modern languages, at Purdue University. And because he was so much in debt, he got a Saturday morning teaching gig at Indiana University across the town. And Purdue found out that he was teaching that course and actually took his chair away for the rest of his tenure. And so here's a guy who told me and my brother when we were 12, listen, I make enough money to cover the house. That's it. If you ever want anything else, you're going to have to do it yourself. So me and my brother were always working. So my dad always kind of had this ongoing story about that he was struggling to, keep everything on the table, although he never made a big deal about it. And Christmas morning, we would wake up and there would be this enormous tree with all these gifts because he had run out New Year's Eve and used a credit card and charged up this huge amount so that the kids could have this great experience. And so I was pretty clear that the way my dad carried that obligation of being a good father and a good provider is what killed him. And I didn't know as much as I I said I was never going to be like my dad, but that's exactly who I ended up like. And so we're going through this conversation. She kept saying, okay, so how big is the pain feel now? Like actually just connect to this idea that my mental state had actually created this physical schism such that, to be frank, I was like counting the months until my life insurance would come into full force, and I was ready to cap my ass because at least then everything would be paid. I was like having those calculations in my head of like, okay, so I know that I can, I'm not going to die at 60. I might live to 80, 85, but I want it to be a vital life. I want to have flexibility. And I realized that, 35 years in a kitchen takes its fucking toll. Bending over 40 degrees, not having enough support, your stomach starts losing its tension. And the only thing that's holding you up is your back muscles, and they start straining. And pulling everything out of alignment. And if we're not conscious of straightening up every once in a while, which is hard because it's go, 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 right? The last thing we think about is, you know, the effect that it has on our body. And so I like to say that, you know, most of us in the industry are really, really, really strong, and yet we're really, really, really sensitive until we're not. And we can put up with so much, and then it, you know, that you go across that fulcrum point, and then to pull myself back has been probably the biggest challenge in the last 4 or 5 years, because having arms go numb and getting a surgery and then the other arm, it just seems like a cascading thing. So, and I know I'm not talking about my career or anything, but it just seems to be so present within this conversation that the minute I stop doing my meditation every morning, the minute I stop doing my daily exercise, even if it's for 30 minutes, I run a very real risk of, you know, putting myself in a mental state that, you know, makes all kinds of bad things seem reasonable. And I want to be around for my children. I want to be around and experience life with my wife. And I have made probably every mistake that there is to make in this career. Substance abuse. I was addicted for 5 years to opioids after 2 back surgeries. And after a while, it's like, do I actually have any pain in my body? Where is the pain? Am I so disconnected from that I had to actually, guides and angels, I got a job. The only job I could get was on the island of Tortola, British Virgin Islands. When I went to the pharmacy and said, I'd like to fill my script, please. And they said, oh, we don't have those here. I'm like, what are you talking about? Yeah, we only use those for surgery here on the island. And then I thought, geez, man, what am I going to do? Fly back to Miami every month? I can't do that. It's $500. Now, it wasn't until later that someone said to me, well, all you had to do was take a boat over to St. Thomas because it's a US province. And I said, it's better if nobody told me, because that was the moment where I had to look myself in the mirror and go like, listen, I'm either going to choose to thrive, not just survive or slowly die, or let that erode me. I actually have to do something about it, which meant, you know, at 290 pounds, completely swollen and sick, you know, I tied my shoelaces on my tennis shoes and I started running very, very, very slowly at first. But from that choice point, there were so many good things that happened almost immediately. My wife likes to say, pisses her off, because once I'm in my flow, I become an instant manifester. But because I'm so stubborn emotionally, that I pull myself out of that all the time, because I doubt, you know, I'm always kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop. And unfortunately, we're so powerful as individuals and human beings that we can actually create our own reality. And what's showing up for me right now is the way I was thinking yesterday. So there's a little bit of delay time. So I need to constantly be on point, as it were, of surrounding myself with positive things. Like, my wife loves CNN, but I won't sit a second. And that's not because of politics. That's just because I can't let that crap in. Because my number one priority right now is to be a good steward of my vibration. And that's being brought home to me right now, even stronger, because over the last 10 days, I wasn't a very good steward. I mean, I let shit take me out, and I am not very good when it comes to that. I am like, because I don't know about you, but my ego can be really, really brutal. It can concoct all kinds of reasons of why I'm not good enough, or I don't deserve, or whatever that story is. And the fact of the matter is, my ego is just doing what it does all the time, just like a dog wagging its tail, and you don't beat a dog for wagging its tail. So the only thing I can do is say, well, thank you for sharing, or thank you for caring, and fuck you for sharing. Just keep your mouth shut. I got this. And so it's almost like constant vigilance. And so as I've gotten more mature and embraced my elderhood within the hospitality community, I've also embraced the mission to support others in developing their mastery around their self-development. And that looks differently, but it starts with the podcast, and then there's the coaching. And it's so funny because, you know, I consider myself a career coach for chefs right now. But really, because the biggest lie that my generation ever held was you leave that shit at the door. And the reality is none of us were able to do that. And that the younger generations who are coming up, who are asking or demanding to be seen as whole human beings and treated that way, I say hooray, because there's not a single one of us that went into the industry that didn't want the same fucking thing. But depending on where our entry point was, we either knew that we were never going to get it, or we were scared of asking for it. And so by your courage of showing up in meetings like this, you also give me courage to be able to be present and say, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Adam. Mike,
You
if
bet,
you can
Aaron.
stop recording. And then, yeah, I thank you for sharing all that with us. I